Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. Today, I'm very, very excited to be bringing to you Erik McBain from HedgeID. Erik, it is wonderful to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be here, and as we say, long-time listener, first-time caller. So great to be, great to be on.
No, absolutely. And look, I'm very excited about this episode because HedgeID is
Yeah.
something I've been watching from afar. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. I'm very excited to bring it into Harrington Star as well. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, a little bit later on too. But I love what you guys have been doing. And I love the fact I'm always very keen to hear the stories of people who've been frustrated with something and then they find a solution to it and it becomes a business and everything else that's going on. So you're at a wonderful stage of the business at the moment. I've heard people talking and raving about it externally as well. So really, really excited to have you on the show and be talking about them through the journey. So with people haven't phoned in to hear me talking about, listened in to hear me talking about it. They want to hear it from you. Erik, tell us a little bit about Erik McBain and then tell us a little bit about HedgeID as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So Canadian. I live in the financial metropolis of Ottawa, Canada, which is a kind of a bit cheeky because it's not a global financial hub. But I spent my early career in institutional finance. So I spent, I'm part of the Deutsche Bank graduate training scheme in 2008, which ended up being a fairly fateful year. And came back to Canada and then worked for a gentleman named Mark Carney at the Bank of Canada. For a few years.
We've heard of him.
Gone on to become the Prime Minister of Canada, and so very interesting exposure to a high performing, high caliber guy like that. But
Absolutely.
What became apparent, Toby, I think I have a very similar personality to you in that I love connecting with people. What really activates me is finding the right person with the right job title and the right message to strike up that initial conversation. And what that really encouraged me to do was get back into the private sector. So about 10 years ago, I joined my first SaaS company. I didn't know anything about SaaS. I'd come from the world of institutional finance, and it's actually funny. The CEO that I'd worked for, a gentleman named Eli Fabi, he hired me at MindBridge was the name of the company, and we sat down and he asked me, what do you do exactly? And I said, I worked in finance and I have my CFA. And he's like, Erik, at a startup, there's two things that are happening. You're building the technology or you're selling it. Do you want the shovel or are we putting you on the phone? And so I said, yeah, just put me on the phone. I'll be the sales guy. I'll
exactly. I'll take that
generate. Yeah. And so I learned very quickly, what it was to stand up the go-to-market motion in a tech company and, setting up CRM and, figuring out who's buying the product that you're selling and kind of listing them from biggest to smallest and then just working the leads. And so as I started refining that motion, it became really a passion and kind of an expression of what I just really love to do. Ever since I was a kid, I always loved to, find interesting ways of meeting interesting people and getting really activated by that. And so I went through the iterations where we ended up building MindBridge into a successful company, sold half of it to a private equity company. I did it again with an equity portfolio trading system provider called Boosted AI, with a credit trading automation tool. I realized that being an employee was one way to monetize this emerging skill that I was developing, but ended up setting up a consultancy where I could fractionally support the commercial ambitions of a handful of different, technology vendors, or what we'll call capital market facing vendors. And that's what ended up bringing me to meeting the team at BMLL. So, Paul Humphrey, I actually cold emailed Paul Humphrey and he said, Erik, I never take a call. I get thousands of these calls, emails, cold outreach a day. He's like, I don't know what it was, but there's something about your outreach and I wanted to learn more about you. So he ended up putting me in touch with Rob Leibel and Jenny. They just joined to scale up the Americas.
Yeah. Very early stages of a good story, right?
Yeah, and what I tell you, I call it due diligence by proxy because I looked at BMLL and before I even knew what they did, I looked at Paul's profile, I looked at Rob, I really looked at Jenny, I looked at Elliot. I said, there's something happening here. Like people of this caliber would not have been attracted to this project if there wasn't something real here. So I did everything I could do to break in.
People first. I love it.
Yeah.
And breaking you did.
And then through that, basically, if you'll believe it, working with a really high caliber group like the folks at BMLL, I had this persistent problem that I'd started seeing the indications of in my first SaaS business I was a part of, which was, how do you mechanize the outbound motion, and how do you deal with the reality that there's no real commercial map that people can use to find the right person at the right hedge fund with the right job title that uses the right strategy or employs the right strategy. And I'd seen the markets from a diversity of different angles. So I'd worked, in central banking. I used to go to the BIS, in Basel. I'd go to Japan. I worked at Deutsche Bank on the buy side and sell side, but I'd never seen a digital map or um, image of the financial markets or capital markets that really satisfied me. And so
Mm,
the technology was just not there yet. There was the idea, there was the data, but there wasn't the context or technology available to build a rich repository of capital market participants. And the the point came, and this was at BMLL, where Rob Leibel had tapped me and said, we want to run a US hedge fund campaign. And so we said, okay, well, we have to list everybody out from the biggest to the smallest. And as we went through this exercise, it became clear that there was like a product here. This was
mm.
something that could be mechanized. This was something that agents and machine learning could help build out a map of the institutional finance landscape as a navigation tool. So that's really the origin story and the genesis of what has become HedgeID. And we're really excited about the opportunity, and have been seeing some really exciting signal from the market around what we're building.
And already sort of attracted some pretty decent people to you. It's been going for a little while. Tell me how that
Yeah.
journey started for you, because I love sort of
Yeah.
doing this. I think it's so useful for people to do. People see this sort of vision, they hear the story, suddenly a company's there, and then it's like that it goes through. But there's so much to it. So tell me about that sort of,
Absolutely.
that's those sort of that sort of early phases for you, and the people you've been able to attract to the business as well is really impressive.
Absolutely. It's interesting when you go to business school, there's a bit of a backwards practice that they teach you to say, okay, entrepreneurship looks like you're going to have some flash of brilliance, idea come to you in a dream, and you're going to build a 30-page business plan, and then you're going to embark. So they would always say, the idea comes first, but the way I've seen this happen time and time again is, guy has a job, guy gets good at it, develops some skills, ends up experiencing pain living in some domain, and then through an act of self-preservation has to solve his own problem, and that problem solution iteration becomes the product. And so
Yeah, yeah.
in many ways that was what happened for me, is that I came in to help a lot of early stage market facing fintechs scale revenue, and it was all about building pipeline, defining ICP, listing out all of the potential buyers of your product, at a company level, but then you'd have to go and find the decision makers, the different
Mm.
personas who would care about what you're doing.
How are you
And
doing that? How are you doing? Sorry to cut in, because I think
yeah,
this is interesting. So when you were doing
yeah,
that beforehand, tell me what you were doing to get to that sort of phase. What did it look
absolutely.
like?
Yeah, so the original premise of CRM, so customer relationship management
Yeah.
tools, the Salesforce and the HubSpots and the raft of them. The whole premise was, okay, we're going to give you an empty relational database, and
Hmm.
you, customer, are going to fill it and clean it. And oh, and by the way, you're going to be responsible for taking care of this, forever. And what happens is that you'd initially fill it up, and then some people would move around, and then the database would start decaying, and then you'd send an email invite to some event you're hosting, half the emails would bounce back because these systems were never really built to tackle the evolving and dynamic nature of industry. And
Yeah.
specifically in a world like institutional finance, it's a complex system. There's a lot of domain specific nuance, and it's hugely, this is great news for a recruiter, but it's high turnover. People are moving
Yeah. Yeah.
around constantly. People are, we would joke that, Bobby Jane, he's at Millennium, then he's at a pod within Millennium, then he goes to Jane Global. So every single vendor on the planet has 7 different versions of Bobby Jane in their Salesforce instance. And so
Yeah. Of
some
course. I
human,
was looking at that
whoever's
just the
the
other day as well. with someone out on our system.
Yeah,
Not
whoever's
with
the
Bobby, not
lowest.
with Bobby himself, but
Yeah, so whoever's lowest on the totem pole is the guy who has to go and resolve and merge them all together. And it just seems like so much wasted work. And what I was realizing is that we were spending a huge amount of cycles cleaning CRM and enriching it. And I think where it really came to a head was, I was helping a company and the CRO said, we want to organize a big event in San Francisco. We want to invite all of the CIOs at long short hedge funds. So let's go and pull that list. And we had to politely go back to the CRO and say, half of the contacts in Salesforce don't have a first name, last name, let alone a job title or strategy or pedigree. Like it's a very thinly, there's just no context. And so that kind of brings us up to where we are today, where a lot of people are trying to bring agents into the mix and use outbound agents to reason over CRM. But CRM doesn't know the difference between a hedge fund, a doctor, a lawyer, a portfolio manager. It doesn't know. It just sees companies' contacts with just kind of contact list information. And so we saw an opening for a contextual repository of capital market participants. And so I sit in Ottawa, but my co-founder Patrick, he is a second-time founder, so he's a friend of one of my best childhood friends. It's his former co-founder, and they started a company called Knack and grew it to a $19 million a year revenue business. It's a marketing automation tool, and Pat and I connected on the idea when I was working at BMLL, and we kind of started pulling on that thread. And I had the third part of the story is Craig Marthinson. So Craig is our CRO, and we brought him out of retirement for the third time to come and help us. And he has an amazing story because him and Lance Ugla were working at TD Securities together. So Lance, is the gentleman who started our Market Partners.
yeah,
And so Craig joined Lance at the barn in St. Albans, or I think it's
St
St.
Albans,
Albans
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
St. Albans in North London, and they started Market Partners.
yeah.
And
That
they
famous
were
barn.
originally,
I love the fable of that barn.
yeah, it's got a bit of folklore to it. And yeah, they were bringing transparency to the credit default swap market, and it was a business plan, and they were had a hope and a prayer, and they ended up building it into a $44 billion business, sold it to S&P, and the rest is history.
Yeah,
But Craig
went
had
okay that one.
retired. He has a great outing, and Brad Levy and all like you should the that is actually been one of the things, Toby, I've been shocked by. And I knew it was a good community that they had, but Craig joined, he was my sales coach, and then was having so much fun as my sales coach. He said, I want to put some money in. And then 2 weeks later, he's like, scrap the sales coach. I'm coming way all in. And he's like, I
Yeah,
want to
there
take
you
a
go.
title. I'm coming in. So he's now the CRO.
That's
But we
that's
did a
that's
bit of a,
that's
yeah,
great, isn't it? When you've got that sort of endorsement to it all, it's you're doing something right.
well, absolutely. And we did a bit of an initial set of meetings with some of his network from the IHS market world. And
Mm.
it's a who's who of sales leadership, and everyone who's gone on, and the alumni network from IHS Market has all gone on to
Well,
found
I saw
businesses,
this.
and
I don't know if we've
incredible.
spoken about this before, but there was a wonderful article, probably about 2 years ago that sort of still sits
Yeah.
in my head, and it basically called out all of the businesses that have been founded by ex market people. And
Yeah.
it
Oh
was a
yeah.
phenomenal list of great people who've been touched by that industry. And I was speaking to Brad earlier on again about the impact that
Yeah.
Lance had on it and on him. And I think it's just this factory of performance that came out of it that I think is brilliant.
Yeah. And an excellent culture, and the talent and the quality of the people it attracted to, I think, became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, to have Craig involved is been amazing, and he's brought a level of maturity to the project that I'm 40. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter, and Pat has a 10-year-old daughter, so he's 40 as well. But Craig, he's in a different age bucket, but he brings his own energy and things that we're all good at slightly different things. So
Which is the
it's
perfect
a
mix, right?
yeah, we're really leaning into AI first. I would say the thing that I think shocks Craig is that how much leverage and torque we have compared to a company that was founded 10 years ago. We're able to
Yeah,
do the work of a team of 30 people just because we're able to use automation and agentic workflows. And a lot of our demos, we're transcribing those, and agents are reading the transcriptions and pulling out key pieces of feedback, and that's then getting picked up in the development org. And it's incredible. So we're
it's
iterating on
very cool.
customer feedback extremely quickly. Uh, and I think that's what keeps you nimble. People say, well, why would you, if you look at some of the incumbents in the space we're competing in, S&P, BlackRock, huge, like the big bad, FactSet, huge incumbents. But the only advantage that a startup really has, and it's an important one, is speed, being able to just move
Mm.
extremely quickly. We have Slack channels for all of our customers set up, and someone will request a feature or a record or an update to something. We're trying to push it up that day, that afternoon. We want it in the tool because, that's the difference of working with a young, hungry, excited group versus someone that just has a job that works at,
Yeah, yeah.
a big data provider, and they're just one of that 10,000 people. So, I think that's really the difference.
This is slightly off the framework that we sort of discussed before coming on
Yeah,
camera, but I'm really interested. I mean, obviously, you're leaning into the agentic world, and I know a lot of
yeah,
the people you come from a strongly SaaS background. I put a poll out this week because I'm really interested about this sort of constant narrative we're all hearing at the moment about
yeah,
the downfall of SaaS and agentic AI is king, and there's a whole new world coming into it. But the sort of four options I put on the poll this week is coexistence. So SaaS
yeah.
and AI coming together. A total
Mhm.
disruption of SaaS and disintermediation of SaaS. A uh, AI is just a bubble, and this will pass. And we'll go back to what we were doing beforehand, which obviously didn't have a huge amount of traction, as you can imagine from all the options. And then the
Yeah,
other one was SaaS super boosted by AI. And to me, this feels a little bit in that fourth category in terms of what you
yeah,
can do and where it can come through. So there's a lot of doomsdayers. You speak to
yeah,
people saying, software engineering's dead. You'll hear a lot of people saying SaaS is dead, and everything's cheaper, easier, quicker with agentic AI. And then I think you've got this voice of reason in the middle of it, which is something beforehand about saying, right, we're here with SaaS at the moment. Certain parts of it will die off, as happens with every industry. But where
yeah,
you're looking at other areas, it's basically the rocket fuel that allows it to really move further forward as well. Tell me where you
yeah,
sit in that debate, and because I think it's relevant to
yeah.
you guys as well, right?
Absolutely. And I follow it very closely because we're constantly thinking about, how are we defensible and what's our moat, and how can we kind of stay at the edge. And I think the premise, and I think the belief that we have, is only by staying at the edge of what's possible is how you do continue to stay informed. But one of the things I do think that the market is missing is this idea of the abstraction layer. It's this idea that there are technologies like a HubSpot that has created and abstracted away the complexity of everyone having to create their own CRM. And now that we have the ability of, anyone can build anything using Claude Code, that doesn't mean we all have to build our own CRM. Like, I think
Mm,
there's scope and need for specialist tools. So just because, Toby, you and I could build our own CRM doesn't mean it's our best use of time. You
mm,
have
mm.
your unique skills. I'm uniquely good at certain things. I'd rather let Dharmesh and the team at HubSpot kind of focus on building the best CRM and taking all of their talent and resources and iterating on that problem so that I can then focus on the problem that I want to solve. And so there's scope and need for specialist tools that abstract away the complexity of painful workflows. I learned that
Yeah,
firsthand at BMLL, where we had a premise of, instead of every single emerging manager, hedge fund, systematic buy side portfolio manager having to ingest all of the data, store it all themselves, normalize it all themselves, and then it made sense for just one vendor to bring the quality to that exercise and then license out that data to everyone else. So not everybody has to do everything. So it really is that this is as old as time with division of labor. Let's have the baker will bake the bread, the plumber will do
Yeah.
his job, and then everyone's better off. And so I continue to think that as I've been going down the rabbit hole with Claude Code, and I've gone from chat interface to Claude desktop to command line interface to going down and down into the rabbit hole, it's enabling me to build things that I couldn't build before. But as my CTO often reminds me, you got to stay in your lane. At least with Pat and I's arrangement, Pat's the builder and I'm the seller. Going back to that analogy from the beginning of the call, and Pat's a 10x developer. He's a second time founder. He's a full stack, very capable developer. For me to bring him some widget that I vibe coded is like, oh, it's
Yeah,
cute. Thank
this
you
is the
for
point,
showing me,
right?
but go and do the thing that you do because that's why we're a team.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I
I
don't
think
know if
that's
that
underestimated.
resonates at
I
all.
absolutely agree. I think that's a very underestimated part of the whole conversation. That just because
Yeah,
someone can do something, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the best way of dealing with it. And I think this is where
yeah,
all of this comes to life. So you mentioned it before, and we've obviously had that sort of shaping thing of the origin story. We know the sort of problem that
hmm
you're there and the frustrations you have with
yeah,
it. We've alluded to it here. Look, this is a very exciting time for the industry. I had a
yeah,
conversation beforehand about sort of 4 or 5 major leaps further forward we're taking technologically at the moment that gives us this great opportunity to build cool stuff and move
yeah,
ourselves further forward. Timing's everything when you're building a business, um, and this is something that you sort of as you say, came across and found that this is the right time for you. But why now? Why is
yeah,
it? What's allowing this to happen? What's the right
yeah,
timing for this for you?
yeah, absolutely. So, maybe I'll tell a little bit of a story around how I used to do things and at least the initial methodology that emerged and how that's become what became a data set and that's now become HedgeID. So, if you and I were to go out and start a high frequency trading technology business and we wanted to go sell into all the institutional finance participants, we would have to find a way of identifying the firms that fit the profile of the thing that we were selling. And then we'd have to find the decision maker within that company. And then we'd have to have enough context to craft outreach and multimodal communication to then stimulate that first conversation. And, that was traditionally done from people who had expertise in the industry and through a huge amount of detective work around looking across different tools and Google searches, et cetera. And so there was no central repository that anyone could really leverage. And, if you think of a tool like ZoomInfo or a LinkedIn, these are what are called horizontal platforms. And horizontal platforms are excellent being kind of good enough for all industry, but they don't really focus on depth in any specific area, not as a limitation, but as a design feature. If I'm ZoomInfo, I can't be 10 miles deep in pharma, but also 10 miles deep in hedge funds and market makers and institutional finance, because the
Yeah,
ontology or the taxonomy will become very, very difficult to wrangle. And so what's emerged is a need for vertical specific context layers to help people navigate more effectively. And I say people, but then that also becomes help agents navigate more effectively. And why I think that we had to do this now was as I've been evolving my use of AI. So the first company I was a part of 10 years ago, MindBridge, that was an AI company. We had an ensemble AI approach to it was an AI audit tool. AI
just
has
before AI
evolved
was
up.
cool, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was early, but it's better to be early than than
Absolutely,
than late.
absolutely.
Um, and how as I kind of evolved my understanding about what AI could do, and then as LLMs came up under us, I started interacting early with ChatGPT as most do, just as a call and response chatbot.
Mm,
And I think the limitation that people would run into is, well, I have to keep reminding ChatGPT about who I am and what I do. And, was there a way of imbuing context into this chat so that it knows when we get started that I'm Erik and that I do this and my company is X and my problem is Y? And so I think that Claude really was one of the pioneers in bringing this context storage methodology to bear, where the big phase shift, I think, for me has been Claude Code stores a Claude MD file. And whether you're on the command line or you're in the chat, it has a collection of context that you can use to imbue your conversation with. Like I have a chat set up on Claude Code because I'm running a 10K in May, so I have a nutrition and fitness and health thing. So I tell it about who I
I
am and
thought you were
how
looking
much
great. That explains it
hey,
all,
thanks. How much I hey, this is the before picture. Uh,
mate.
so I tell it, how much I weigh and the activity and what I'm eating and nutrition. And so every time I open up this nutrition or health chat, it knows it has the context. So I can ask it, what zone should I be running in to train for this 10K? And it has enough context. And so I want you to think of these AI tools now have the ability to use tools and to use context and to reason. And so what we're really seeing with HedgeID is the ability to offer the agents an industry specific context layer so that it can determine, okay, who has the most AUM, what this specific hedge fund, do they use Databricks or Snowflake? And
Yeah,
for
yeah,
the LLM to actually be able to interface with this repository of information to help it navigate. And it's a really exciting concept because there are all sorts of what they call MCPs or model context protocols that are emerging. There's a whole universe of these systems. And I'd love to show you sometime just at how I'm using these tools. Like I've got Claude on the CLI or the command line, and it's connected to my HubSpot, and it's connected to HedgeID. I've got it connected to my Gmail. It's connected to GitHub, so Pat and I can communicate. It's sending messages to Slack. So I could do something as simple as, I want to talk to all of the heads of sales at the global exchanges. So it'll kind
yeah.
of go into HedgeID. It'll find, the head of sales at, the Singapore Stock Exchange. It'll read up about who that guy is and what he does and where he worked. And it'll draft an email. It'll stage it in my Gmail. It'll inject it as a new contact into HubSpot. I'll review it, maybe drop in a piece of collateral, and then I'll hit send. And it just, instead of me having to jump between all of these tools, I'm using AI and the LLM as almost this hub that's connecting into all of these different tools that I'm using to get my job done. And that's the same for everyone. I've had the opportunity to work with some extremely sophisticated technology pioneers, like the guys at Baton, like Daniel Shefford,
Yeah, yeah,
Adam Mingos. These guys
yeah,
are pushing the limit of what's possible in the trading realm, and they're all in on, well, how can we do things better, and how can we use agentic workflows, and how can we store the context of who their ICP is, and then the machine knows, okay, these guys do well with outsourced trading desks, and there's this specific persona that works, and the machine's able to just keep everything organized and just surface to people, here's your next best call. So really, really exciting time. This is only going to get more intense and more exciting. But as we said at the beginning, the only way to stay up and to stay relevant and to create a defensible business with a moat is just to stay at the edge, to be the most sophisticated user of AI in your specific niche.
yeah. I think that's such an interesting part of it, isn't it? To be the most sophisticated user of AI in your specific niche, and I think
Mhm.
that's a great line for what happens with it, within this and where the alpha to me exists for anyone at the moment. And look, there's a lot of I still think there's a lot of dancing around the handbags with AI, for want of a better expression. I still think
Yeah.
people are sort of, talking about needing it, but not necessarily knowing what for, and trying to find solutions to,
Yeah.
or problems that don't necessarily need solutions to be found for them. But when you get it right and you can push that further forward, there's two things that sort of live in my head around this whole movement at the moment, and why I'm so excited about what you're doing, because I think we've spent the last, well, probably since the crash, I think
Mhm.
everyone's spent an awful lot of time trying to look for efficiencies, reduce cost, and that's been
Yeah.
we've had nearly 2 decades of people thinking, how can we strip back? And
Yeah.
at the same sort of time, we've seen a productivity crisis where people are doing less and achieving less over that sort of stage. So right,
Yeah.
with margins staying roughly similar, the alpha has been gained by reducing costs around that sort of stuff. And there's only so much you can throw off the
Yeah.
hot air balloon before there's nothing else to go over the edge, right? Right.
That's
And
right.
so the other
Yeah.
side of it is how can we create a situation where people are better and work on
Yeah.
productivity? And what I love about this agentic movement, what I love about people who are really looking at AI is it isn't just something there which talks about efficiency and cost reduction. It can do that. We know that the
Yeah.
headlines around that sort of stuff. But what we've also got is this monumental opportunity to increase speed, which you're speaking out beforehand, and in
Yeah.
so doing, increase production, allowing people to have more accuracy. The
Absolutely.
thing that just you spoke about there really blows my mind about how good it can do, and what I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Really getting into working with HedgeID in our business, about how we can
Hmm.
just look at that sort of information. And once you've got network, and once you combine that with speed of information and access and knowledge and value, I think it can be
Absolutely.
transformational in terms of what you're able to do and take to people and have all that information. So I'm so excited about where you're going with it all, and I
Absolutely.
think it does have a real impact on where does this is something I want to move on to now a little bit about where does this
Hmm.
go in the future of go to market, because I think I've seen. I know I'm on a bit of a rant here, but this is one of my favourite subjects,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to roll with it.
Yeah.
I've seen over recent years an evolution in the salesperson within this sort of space. I was with someone yesterday, Ian Maudsley, where we were talking about the role of a product manager becoming a lot more salesy, and a role of a sales manager becoming a lot more product orientated, and this whole
Yeah.
concept of having much more informed and technologically minded salespeople who are able to sort of
Yeah.
add more value to it. And I think if you haven't got value, if you haven't got knowledge as a salesperson, you can't rely on blag like you used to in former years. And to me, that feels like where the market's going and what we're seeing within this, and why HedgeGuide is so ideally fitted to this new world of sales.
That's right.
But I don't want to put that all in your mouth. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I think you're exactly right. And I think I break it into three pieces. So, the technology that we've developed, and I think this class of technology around, industry specific context layers, they do three things. So, firstly, it's bringing much more precision targeting to commercial outreach. So instead of having to talk to 1,000 people and disqualify half of them because they don't do the thing that you're selling, you end up spending more time engaged with the right type of person at the right firm that trades the products that you're selling or engaging. So it's really a precision play. And what does precision mean for revenue? It means you can close more deals.
Mm,
Our core persona buyer of our technology is the CRO. So we go to a
mm.
CRO at a market-facing vendor, and they say, "I've got a problem." My salespeople are sending people messages on LinkedIn. They're going to events. They're doing a whole bunch of unorganized, maybe not systematic stuff, and they're it feels like we're wasting a lot of time. We're having to talk to a lot more people than we need to kind of get to buyer, get to potential buyer. So bringing a lot more precision in the search and discovery process. And number two, I would say there's a big efficiency dimension. uh, there's a classic tar pit problem of end of quarter, you're the CRO, your salespeople are fiddling with CRM, adding first name, last name, and not sending DocuSigns, not chasing down that contract that's out for signature. So really redeploying your team to higher value revenue producing work, not the
Keep them in the red zone. That's what I've always
keep
thought
them
about
in the
listening
good.
to you. Yeah,
This is it. Don't, and it sometimes it feels like work. There's this illusion of productivity of no, I just spent an hour adding job titles to contacts that were, missing in the CRM. It's like that's doing nothing to get us closer to target. So
yeah.
let's let the machine do the stuff the machine can do, and let's get the humans to really lean into their unique skills. I think of it as a repositioning. It's like AI is not going to replace humans, but humans that use AI are going to replace the ones that don't.
Mm.
And it's really an amplifying tool where it can reallocate the human up the value curve to spend more time on high value, more enjoyable work. I don't know, Toby, you and I seem like very similar people that it seems like we get activated by connecting with people. If I could spend every day, all day talking to interesting people, learning
Hmm.
about them, telling me about, telling them about who I am, that would be a life well lived.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so everything else, if I could abstract away all of the fiddling and the drafting and the having to pick calendar times and send them, and I could just spend all my time on calls with people, that would be great. And so,
So 16 years ago, um, when we started this business, or coming up to, there was a meeting, and we were beauty parading CRMs, and we were
yeah,
looking at what we wanted to use, and there was some, pretty, it's, nothing like it is today, or where it goes. But we looked at various different products, and the product we ended up using, and we're still with today, and it has evolved tremendously, as which I love about it at the same sort of time as well. But when we were sat
yeah,
there right at the very start of this journey with it all, um, I said those words about the red zone. It's like I want people to be, I want people to concentrate on doing, of closing, of being with people, of closing deals, of doing all that sort of stuff, rather than fiddling
yeah,
with things and making it overcomplicated. And I've been in the business beforehand where the biggest frustration was the system, and that should never be the case for a sales team. It should allow them to
no,
play it where they're doing best. And you're exactly right. I had lunch yesterday with a chap who was introduced to me by another contact, and his business is training about networks. So he's looking to build
yeah,
elite level networkers, and he was one. And I think when people think about the art of networking, they think about working in a room and being in this as sort of like a
yeah,
meetup or a trade show or
yeah,
whatever. But networking is about nurturing and building networks and knowing people and introducing themselves to people and having that conversation. The more time you can be doing that and getting people in
yeah.
front of the right people and having the tools that allow them to do that sort of stuff, I'm 100% in the right sort of thing for you. So,
Absolutely.
Eric, this is why I'm so excited about it, and excited about you and the product and where it goes. I love what you
Yep.
what you're doing. I'm also conscious that we said it at the start, the two of us love talking, and
Yeah.
we're flying through the minutes on all of this. So let's
Yep.
start to round things up and talk about
Yep.
what's happening and where it goes. Look, this is um, a fascinating time for you in the industry. Give me some final thoughts about what goes, why you're
Yeah.
excited, and why people
Absolutely.
should be getting
So
in touch with you and Hedge ID at the moment.
yeah, we're in a really interesting phase, probably the most exciting phase of a business where we have, a cohort of early, customers. We think of our customers at this stage as really partners. We're thinking about our partners as, let's get in the tent together. Let's solve your commercial problems. Let's think about what success looks like for you. And we really build and iterate to, how our customers want to use technology and how they want to, just be better. And so, we're growing that customer list dramatically. We are, getting the word out, showing what we've built to people that are interested or building in adjacent spaces and learning from each other. And really excited to continue to scale this business throughout the calendar year. We're potentially looking at bringing in just kind of a strategic funding round. So it's going to be probably a seed, what we call a seed round. And so you can kind of think of we've got a couple folks in the kind of senior exited financial data sphere that are kind of going to join that pool of people. But anybody that's interested in participating, definitely reach out and we can show you what we're doing and where we're going, and find some ways of leveraging each other. So.
So if you're a CRO in this space, this is the man to call, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Craig. I'll flash Craig's 1-800 number at the end. You can give
Yeah,
him a
quite,
call.
quite right. Quite right.
Yeah,
It's a hell of a team. Eric,
yeah,
it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show. If people do want to get, you mentioned the 1-800 now, but if people want to find out a little bit more, get in touch with
yeah,
you, check you out on
yeah.
LinkedIn, anywhere else to find you.
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn, www.hedgeid.com. LinkedIn is a great place. I'm, like you, Toby, pretty active in the social sphere and social selling. So, if you don't find me, I'll probably find you. But definitely reach out, and I'd love to find time to get introduced, tell you what we're doing, and go from there.
You got the
Yeah.
tools for it. Listen, Eric, a great way I'm filming this on a Friday towards the end of the play here in the
Yeah.
UK, and it's a great way to end the day. So I'm finishing on a high, finishing the week on a high. Speaking to
Yeah.
Erik McBain, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sir.
Have a great weekend, Toby. Thanks.
You too. And thanks for watching. We will see you soon on the very next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.